This building, on the corner of Washington and Dubuque Streets in downtown Iowa City, looks like a typical office building. However, for a period of 10 years, its wall was a monument to a famous Midwestern Native American leader.
There was a large mural, and it was an Indian chief sitting down below, and then above him were like visions of deer and hunters and the rest. It was an enormous thing, and it was called Black Hawk's Dream.
I think it's named after Chief Black Hawk. They used to have the drawing going up there, and I suppose just whatever historical connection it has to the area. It's as close as I can get.
This area right over here is called Black Hawk Mini Park. Can you tell me why?
No, I can't.
You don't remember any particular incidents that ever took place?
No, I really don't remember at all. I just remember that's what it was called, and that we had a big mural painted all over it. But I don't remember the history of it.
I was standing at the corner of Washington Street and Dubuque Street in December of 1974, and I looked around me, and everything was so grim and torn up, and of course it was cloudy and snowy, and I just decided that if you threw a bucket of paint at a wall, it would make the town look better. And that's how the whole idea started for developing some murals and public art in Iowa City. I had been reading about murals. I mean, I knew about murals. I knew there were lots of murals being done all across the United States and in the Southwest, but they'd never been done here in Iowa City, to my knowledge, in any major way. There have been some inside ones, I think, in the past. Certainly in the post office, I think there were some done during the WPA project. So that's kind of how it all started, the idea of doing something in Iowa City, to bring some color. I guess my personal interest was just to bring some color into downtown Iowa City. I'm originally from Iowa City. This has always been my hometown. I have a great fondness for Iowa City, and I kind of wanted to do something for the city. The city was very supportive, and they allowed my students and myself to paint a bus, a city bus. And that became one of the first kind of graphic murals on the exterior of the city bus that went all around Iowa City. And then I was teaching calligraphy at that time as well, and we did calligraphed poetry to put in the bus. And so it was a kind of like an art bus that went zooming all over town. And so that was the first thing we did. And so people became kind of aware of what this could do in the community.
This is an example of the murals that were painted in the downtown area by students in Donna Friedman's workshop.
I was a new instructor at the University of Iowa in the art department, and I founded the Visual Environmental Design Workshop at that time as a way to create murals or graphics or public art and give my students some real-life experience in doing these kinds of large projects, and also give them experience of dealing with the dynamics of working with city government and downtown commerce and things like this. And so that was kind of formed simultaneously with trying to revitalize downtown, getting the people of downtown more aware of what could go on with murals in different sites, and part of this progressive exhibition that we had of sites and paintings that would show how the environment could change if you had a painting on that wall. And we tried, and through my talks, I tried to give information that would let the people understand that the fact that they had a graphic or some kind of painting on a wall didn't mean they were going to have to live with it forever, that it was a temporary measure, and it was meant mainly as a way to make the environment more positive and more attractive during this time of urban renewal. Everyone in my class designed for that particular wall, made a design, created a design. Some created more than one. And then as a class, they decided which design they liked the best. And they decided on a design done by Eric Christensen, who was one of my students at that time. So his basic design, overall design, was used for the large wall. And he used M.C. Escher as kind of an inspiration also. But how he worked with those figures was totally original on his part. The figure of Black Hawk, the Indian Black Hawk, was painted by William Heyer. And Bill did a lot of research on Black Hawk and went to the archives at the libraries to find images of Black Hawk that were close to what they thought he looked like. Black Hawk was appropriate as a historical figure in this area because he had actually come into Iowa and had raiding parties in Iowa. And so Black Hawk had probably been in this area, or his people had been in this area. There's an area on the smaller wall to the right of the big wall that had bison on, and that's the one that I designed, and that was done using actually bison from the city park at that time that we had as kind of an inspiration for that, and it seemed to fit the historical theme that we were dealing with. But the owners of the building behind the mural, the Black Hawk, the Spirit of Black Hawk mural, wanted a mural on their wall as well once we got started. So that's how it kind of happened. I developed the environmental design workshop as a way to work with murals, way, as I said, to get my students involved in public art and involved in some real life projects. And some of the politics are involved in actually getting some of these ideas to fruition, that it's not easy and you do have a lot of challenges. The city was supposed to give permission for us to paint that wall, and the city supposedly had the right to give permission because that land belonged to the city. And so I was working with Neil Berlin, he was a city manager, and Ed Zarnicki, and the night before, and we'd gotten permission, and the insurance for the mural painters and myself were covered by the City Business Association. They were covering that, and that took time to find also. And Dick Summerwell once again was very helpful with that. You also needed to have some kind of lease that said that legally you had the right to paint this wall. Otherwise, anybody could come in and destroy the mural. And in that lease, you also said that it would stay up for X amount of time. So I was using information that I'd received by going to other mural workshops, or by things I'd read on murals and problems that people had in other communities. So in an attempt to get this wall lease, I had a lot of trouble with the city. And the day before I was supposed to start painting the mural, I heard over the news that they had stopped the mural. I heard this. And at the city council meeting, the city council said, you cannot paint, they won't be able to paint the mural because we don't agree with the lease, that the lease isn't adequate. And I don't even know if I heard it or somebody called me and said, we just heard this. And that was like at 7:30 or something, or half an hour after the council meeting had started. So I went tearing down the council meeting. I got there and I said, what is this? I just heard you said that we can't start the mural. And they said, and the lawyer for the city, whose name I don't remember, said, well, he said, this isn't adequate. What if the wall would fall down? I said, why would the wall fall down? We're just putting paint on it. Well, the city has too much liability in this. What if something fell on one of the students? What if something fell inside and damaged the office building inside? I said, we're just putting paint on this wall. And so he said, absolutely not. And he said, we just think that Judge Osmondson, who was the executive for that building, would probably, not agree with this, and we don't have this right, and so therefore we're not going to do it. Okay, so I went back home. I was absolutely furious, and I called Judge Osmondson. Meanwhile, now it's 8:30 or 8:45 at night, and I called Judge Osmondson, and I said, who I was, and explained it. Now I had talked to him once before about the mural, And I said, and now they're going to stop it. And he said, well, now let me get this right. He said, you're just going to put paint on the wall, right? I said, yeah. And he said, you're going to put a scaffold alongside the wall. Yes. He said, you're not going to poke any holes in the wall. I said, no. He said, I have no trouble with this at all. He said, if you bring me that lease, he said, I'll sign it. So I went back to City Council that night, and I announced that I had just talked to Judge Osmondson, and he said he would sign the lease, and that he had no trouble with it at all. And the city lawyer threw his papers up very dramatically in the air and swore. And then, so then I got the lease, and then I went, and the next morning I had Judge Osmondson sign it at about 8:30 in the morning. All right, now, the scaffolding is supposed to be delivered at, I think, 9. The scaffolding is not there at 10. Didn't come at 9, 9:30, didn't come at 10. So at 10:30, I called the scaffolding company. I said, where's the scaffolding? We're waiting down here. And I thought, well, maybe there's some problems because there's urban renewal was such a mess and there was so much backup, and I just thought maybe it's taking a long time to get there and get it all loaded. And it was 2 stories, 60 feet long of scaffolding. It's a lot of scaffolding. And they said, well, we heard that it had been canceled. And I said, I cannot believe that you did that. I said, if I were a man, I said, I don't believe you would have done that. I said, if I wanted that canceled, I would have called and canceled it. I ordered it. I said, if I didn't want it, I would have called and said I didn't want it. I said, how dare you do that and take that on yourself? So they were very apologetic, and they were very nice, and they brought the scaffolding very quickly, and they helped us for half a day put it up, because I think they felt so badly about it. So that was really wonderful, and so that was very helpful. So that was the problem with the scaffolding. So it was interesting getting all this done. The mural was designed to only last about 5 years, and we assumed that after 5 years, urban renewal would be in full swing, and most of the buildings would have been rebuilt downtown Iowa City, and it wasn't meant to last forever. The thing about the park, though, there's some interesting history on the park, and that is that, as I said before, that was just a space, a green space. It wasn't a park. And there was a man who was part of the Arts Council, an elderly gentleman, who used to go to all the city council meetings, and he came to me and he said, Donna, he said, I can make this into a park, and if I make it into a park, they won't be able to get rid of the mural right away, and they won't be able to use the green space to build a building on. Because once you make something an official park, it is very difficult to undo it. And so he went through all the politics of, and I think his name is Mr. Hunter, but I'm not sure that. I'd like to check that. But he was a wonderful man. I think he was in his 80s. And he was there all kinds of people came together to help on this. It really was wonderful. So he was the one who went to the city council, who got all the documents necessary, filled them all out, to have it named and designated an official park, an official city park. And once that was done, I don't think the city council realized what that meant long term, because long term it just meant they were going to have an awful lot of trouble ever doing anything about that. And it became identified as a place. It was a Black Hawk Park, and it just became so important, so that at the time when they actually got ready to sell that space, there was kind of people were very upset over the fact that space might be sold. I think, and I'm glad that it never was sold. It remained as a city park, and I think that's one of the outcomes of that mural, is that space remains a city park. And I think that there were all kinds of musical events that happened. The Arts Council, the city and Johnson County Arts Council was being formed at the same time. And we had all kinds of musical activities that were sponsored in the park. And I really think in some ways it became the showcase for what the arts are in Iowa City. And we had done we'd had an NEA grant to do a survey of all the artists that were in Johnson County, and it was shown that about 75% of the artists in Iowa live in Johnson County. And we just had this incredible amount of just talented, wonderful, creative people in this town. And I think they really showed off well at that time. And I think that everybody was very inspired. And so I think the kinds of things that continue, murals and the public art that they have in terms of musical performances and stuff, much of that started at the time of the Black Hawk Mini Park, when it started, the Black Hawk mural was painted. However, I will say I like what they've done with the wall. I think that I was surprised how well it came out. I was glad that they used a historical piece from the old armory. I like the idea of stars on that building. I think there's kind of an uplifting quality, like the birds were there. I see really some kind of similarities in the expression. So I like what they did very much. Other murals that we painted, like the animal shelter, that actually was not done during that summer. That was done later. That actually has been one of my favorite murals because it just was such a funky place, and I always got such a charge when I would drive around that curve and see that mural there. Actually, I was at an art opening the other day, and somebody said, you know, I really miss that animal shelter mural now that the new animal shelter is there. And that was one of my favorites. Other murals that we worked on, there was a mural called Life in the Health Sciences Library, which I think is the last mural that our team, one of my teams, did. We also did another mural in the Student Union, the Memorial Union, downstairs. That was like iridescent bubbles and liquid on oil and on water. And I think that was only there for a year or two. I'm trying to think what other ones we did. We did quite a few. The Life mural has some interesting personal kind of asides, and that is that I met my husband, my present husband, because of that mural. That he had been made the new health sciences librarian, and he called the art department asking if the woman who was doing murals all over town would be willing to do a mural in the health sciences library, because he had this long space that it's a walkway down to Veterans Hospital. It's 2 stories. And so I called back, and one of my teams that summer of '77 went over and designed and painted that mural. Most of that designing for that mural was actually done by Donna Slager, who's now a scenic artist in Chicago, and quite a good artist. But she did the majority of that designing, and then she had a group of people who worked with her to paint it. But I met my husband then for the first time. It was all business, and then I re-met him a year later at a church potluck. And then it was a couple months later after that we actually started dating. So that's an interesting aside.
The Black Hawk mural lasted until 1986, more years than originally planned. The wall on which it had been painted was renovated by new owners of the building. It had become a fixture in downtown Iowa City as a backdrop for the concerts and other activities that were increasingly taking place in Black Hawk Mini Park. In the years since the mural was removed, many other Iowa City building projects have included a mural as part of their landscape, a legacy, we'd like to think, of the Black Hawk mural.
This area right here is called the Black Hawk Mini Park.
Yes.
Do you remember why?
I do, yes.
Good.
Because there was, at one time, a wonderful blank wall here. There had been a building that burned in 1968 or 69 or 70 before we arrived. And for a long time, this was just a big hole in an empty place. And then there was an assignment given, and I don't remember who it was to, but they drew a painting of an Indian brave on the wall, and as it was one of those wonderful, like an Escher portrait, because it went into great eagles flying away, and so it formed this great, almost like an hourglass with the Indian at the base and then moving up to the eagles flying off the surface, off the top of the building. It was great. It was great. And that's one thing that I really miss about it. I like the walking mall, but I do miss that.